shifting our focus toward the professional ranks because we try to make sure we follow Utah. Dang, I did it again. Utah Hockey Club as they begin their preseason. And, of course, we have friend of the show, Keith Schertz of Hive State Hockey on with us. How you doing, Keith?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing today?
Doing good. Trying to get over my tendency to keep calling Utah Hockey Club Utah State. I every time.
Well, by the time you build up the muscle memory to say Utah Hockey Club, they'll have a new name next year.
Yeah, that may help. That's the thing that may end up getting me out of it is if I get to call them like Utah Yetis or something, because I don't know. I'll figure it out at some point.
Utah Hockey. So Utah Hockey.
Yeah.
UHC. Whatever. It's weird.
It's something we'll get used to, and then we'll have to get used to something else. So
yes, exactly right. But yeah, Yeti, Mammoth, whatever it ends up being, it's just fun to have a hockey team here in Utah.
Yeah, I think the betting money is on Yeti. But again, yeah, Keith Schertz of Hive State Hockey over on YouTube. Make sure to check that out. But Keith, wanted to just lead off with obviously the most important thing is we've been waiting, and I know it's not like the regular season, but hockey is being played, professional hockey, by a Utah-based hockey club in the Delta Center. I know they've played games in the Delta Center before, but now it's finally here, at least kind of. It's preseason. There's an asterisk, but it's here. It is here.
It's here, and it's exciting. I thought it was really fun to see the team go out onto the ice and the fans react to that. And an electric first period last night that gave fans kind of all of the things, a couple goals, a couple fights, a couple good saves. So, yeah, I mean, I thought it was a pretty good exhibition to kind of welcome the local market into watching a hockey game in person.
So I want to continue to talk about the in-person element of that, in that the Smiths have made it clear that the Delta Center is not exactly a great venue, at least not for all seats, to watch hockey. What does that look like in the arena? What's the configuration like when they're hosting a game now? Then there are going to be some seats where you may not be able to see all the ice.
Yeah, so behind the nets, it's a really kind of interesting seat. It would be pretty cool to have one of those seats, but there's 4 or 5 rows right behind the net, right behind the glass, behind the net. But then all of the chairs essentially are folded in all the way up to the bottom of the lower bowl there. There's only maybe 2 or 3 seats that go down in the lower bowl in the Delta Center. And then that giant wall cliff of folded up seats is there. And then there's 4 or 5 rows right behind the glass. And so the ice hockey rink is much bigger than an NBA court. It actually gives you a great appreciation. The NBA court is about as big as the Jumbotron over the top. And when you see that there's 5 hockey players on skates and it goes up and down a lot faster in a basketball court, but when you think about how big NBA players are and how small that court is for them to all work in, it's like no wonder being an official in that league is so impossible. But as it relates to the NHL and having that sheet of ice inside the Delta Center, it's jam-packed. There are just in terms of premium seating right against the glass and all that, it's just not quite the same as you see in all the other hockey arenas that you'll see on TV.
So what was that I believe you were at the game, right?
Yes. Yeah, I had a chance at 10.
So what was the crowd experience like? I know it's preseason, but this is the first Utah Hockey Club game in the state. I imagine there were a lot of people there wanting to, partake in that excitement there.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was fun to see everything go, and it's fun to see like kind of the awkwardness of like fans don't know what to chant yet for this team. There's a lot of "Let's Go Utah." My personal favorite that some fans got going is they try to do like a slow clap where they're going, Utah, 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 and get faster and faster. I thought that was pretty good. But the fans are busy trying to figure out ways to support the team and try to build a little momentum and cheer for them in different ways. And so there's some awkwardness and some kind of, trying to figure out what that culture is going to be. In terms of what the Utah Hockey Club organization had put together, I was kind of hoping that there'd be like an organist. I just figured, given we're here in Utah, I just figured there'd be some amazing organist to play at the arena, and it'd feel like a hockey game. But they decided to go against that. They had a club DJ there that was making mashups all night and just trying to have it be there. I like the organist better. I want to feel like I'm at a hockey game, not at a club. But I thought that, but at the end of the day, mostly I thought that the presentation was pretty good. And there's other, rhythms that they'll get into and things that, whoever the producer was for the Jumbotron, for instance, has some learning of the sport, I think, to do, because there were a couple times where the puck came out of the blue line, but I thought it got held in, and the officials called it as an offside because the puck came out of the zone. And instead of giving us a replay and showing us whether or not we held in the puck and whether or not we could get on the official, they were instead showing us, a save from 3 or 4 minutes before. And so those things to create a home ice advantage, the same way the Jazz, if somebody's foot is just barely on the baseline, the producer for the Jumbotron knows to show the crowd whether or not he was in or out. And that sort of nuance needs to be done in the presentation for the Utah Hockey Club. But first game, and they'll work those things out, I'm sure.
I'll be honest. I feel like a lot of those Jumbotrons almost have, I have to feel like it's a mandate, because like a lot of times that's not something that's been unique to, I think, Utah Hockey Club. Because I've seen that in Jazz games, the Utah State games, where it's like, show that last controversial play, and then they don't play it. Almost because I feel like they're told don't do it.
Well, there are some institutions that don't want to inflame the crowd, while others are like, that's why they're here. Yeah. Let's all be in on this together. Was he in or was he out? And so let's get the crowd pumped one way or the other. But yeah, I would lean more, if I were running things, I'd lean into let's get the crowd into whatever decision needs to be made here. So, but there are some that stay away from it.
Yeah, let's create an advantage there. And listen, all sports fans like to get after the officials, but I find that the people here in Utah really like to get on officials. So why wouldn't you help that happen? Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I say I almost feel like there's a mandate, because otherwise it's the only reason they would not do that. But
so Keith, outside of the other optics or logistics of the game last night, this is the second preseason game for this team. They had a game in Iowa over the weekend, and they had this one in Salt Lake last night. I mean, what's the product on the ice showing you so far for this team?
Yeah, so I definitely think that this team has offensive firepower when they have the power play at 5-on-5. And really the best way to tell the overall health of a team is what they're doing at 5-on-5. They're not generating good looks and good chances on offense at 5-on-5. They're really clinical on the man advantage, but in 5-on-5 they're having a lot of difficulty getting into the zone through the neutral zone. And so it's one of those frustrating things where they're not connecting from defensemen up to the forwards at this point. And, part of that is that we've got a huge roster right now, and they're trying some guys who got a chance to play in a preseason game who are going to get cut over the next couple days. And as you see the guys that we all expect to be on the senior squad before it's all said and done, they will all start to gel. And I'm hoping that will mean a more smooth entry into the offensive zone and less dump-ins and chip and chase sort of work. I like it when you have carries. I like it when you pass across the blue line. We go tape to tape, and you can set up your offense in the offensive zone instead of trying to just forecheck your way to it. And so sometimes you got to dump, and sometimes you got to go chase that puck. But as things currently stand, that's kind of what we're seeing on the 5-on-5. But the good news is that the Stars are coming up big through the first two games. So in the big moment, Dylan Gunther, who just signed a big contract for 8 years, he scored. He helped get an assist. Clayton Keller had the game-winning goal in overtime last night. The game-winning goal was scored by Logan Cooley. So all of the star players are making the clutch plays to help the Utah Hockey Club come away with the first 2 wins in the preseason.
So you mentioned a few of those players, and I wanted to ask you about the stars. Are those kind of the main ones we should be looking at? Is those guys to be, obviously they may get limited minutes with them trying out the entire roster they have, but those are the guys we should be paying attention to, that we should expect to not only be on the main roster but be the stars? Yeah,
for sure. If Logan Cooley and Clayton Keller and Dylan Gunther, there's a couple other players as well, right? But if those 3 are not putting goals, they're not putting the puck in the back of the net, that's not going to be a very good season. There's going to be a lot of losses. But I think that they look more comfortable. Keller is experienced, but the other 2, Gunther and Cooley, are entering their second season. And so in their sophomore campaign, I expect both of them to be pretty close to that 30-goal mark, which is sort of the elite goal-scoring mark. It makes you one of the top 25 or 30 best goal scorers in the league. And I have a feeling that Utah Hockey Club potentially has 3 of those kinds of scorers on the team. And if they can score like that, then, there'll be plenty of goals. It's just all the other stuff, goalkeeping and what happens with the defensemen, and that's where all the questions are. But in terms of scoring goals, which you have to do to win games, I think they should be set there.
Now, remind me, are there any other? They have a few more preseason games, but they don't have any more in Salt Lake, correct?
Yeah, there's no more in Salt Lake. They have, I think 5 more left before they have that first game against the Chicago Blackhawks in the Delta Center.
Yeah, it's 5, you're right, because they play at Vegas, at Colorado, at San Jose, at Anaheim, and then they have a neutral site game against Colorado.
Okay.
So, but kind of talking about players, mentioned some of the stars. Are there any players that are kind of on the fringe of making the roster that are maybe worth paying attention to, guys that may be surprises in the preseason, may earn a roster spot? Or is that something that maybe doesn't happen as much in the hockey preseason, where the roster's probably mostly set? Like, what's kind of that like?
Yeah, I think when you watch NHL preseason, it is to see if there's a guy that can be undeniable and sneak their way in and get the audition. There's this really interesting construction that they have where the NHL has an agreement with the junior league hockey team. So this is the WHL, so kids under the age of 20. And WHL for the western side of this continent, and the OHL for the eastern side of this, but they're both junior hockey league teams. But what can happen is if one of the kids is playing well, you can actually give them a 9-game NHL audition, and they get a chance to play in 9 games, and then you send them back to the juniors. And you don't necessarily have to use any of the entry-level contract money on that player for the year. So you don't burn a year of their eligibility, so to speak. And so there is a chance that we will see a couple players get a 9-game audition, but this team, in my opinion, is pretty set. I do not see. There was some talk about Maverick Lamoureux. He's a defenseman. He's 6'7". He is very big for a hockey player, and he's hard to get around. But we were able to see last night that he does not quite yet have the ability or adjustment for the speed that you see at the NHL, and also his balance, because when you're 6'7", his center of gravity is so high. So I think he's got to get a lot stronger. So I think another year in the minors and coming along will go a long way to help Maverick Lamoureux become a more solid figure for the Utah Hockey Club in the future.
We're talking to Keith Schertz. He's with Hive State Hockey. It's a channel on YouTube. And Keith, let me ask you about that channel. You've got like player breakdowns. You've got like coaching breakdowns and some of the things that what to expect from watching this team. But what are some of the other things that people can see and learn from your YouTube channel? And are there others who contribute to this channel?
Yeah. So far it's just me. I'm doing it so far on my own. But one of the things that's been really fun about it is I've had a couple chances to have a couple people within the organization actually have sent me a message, and they're trying to share some information with me. And the idea here is that I have been making a couple breakdowns of what to look for when you're watching the game. So a lot of it is trying to teach people where their eyes should go or how they should think about whether or not a player is being smart on the ice or if they're making bad decisions. And so I have done a lot of work to try to make sure that the breakdowns that you see on the channel enable people the opportunity to learn the game a little bit and have a better sense of what's going on out there and the way that the coach and the general manager will be thinking about things.
I think that means I needed to subscribe to that channel.
Yes, you just told me there's a lot more videos I need to consume.
Like I'm not even pandering because you're on the show. I legit think I need to go subscribe.
It's exactly what I need to get ready for the season.
So for sure, yeah. And I just put out. It's long. It's probably longer than it should have been. But there's transition defense. What makes good transition defense? What makes bad transition defense? And I think if you watch that video, I think you'll definitely have a good feel for that. I went through and grabbed every goal scored by every player that's on the team this year or that I anticipate on being on the team this year. So you could kind of begin seeing, well, where do they score on the ice? Do they score on a one-timer? Can they score a slap shot from the blue line? And kind of get a feel for all of those things. So there's lots of ways and resources so that if you need to get up to speed on hockey, I'm hoping to be a good resource for that.
Well, one of these players that you recently profiled, Dylan Guenther, and you've mentioned him earlier in the broadcast today. He just recently signed an 8-year extension with the hockey club, and he's only 21, 22 years old. He's young.
21. Wouldn't it be nice to know that you were going to make like $50 million from now until the Olympics come here in 2023? Yeah, no, it's really exciting. Again, Canadian legend. He scored the golden goal in overtime to help Canada win the World Junior Championship, like the World Cup of hockey. Big deal. That puts him in a class with like Sidney Crosby and Jordan Eberle. So like he's a celebrity, big time player in Canada, and he has been a player who now Utah Hockey Club and Bill Armstrong in particular, the general manager, he likes to make players. He'd rather bring a player up to the NHL team too late rather than too early. And Dylan Guenther was probably a player that deserved to be on the NHL team 2 years ago, but was sent back to go play in juniors in the WHL. He probably should have been on the NHL team last year after preseason, but instead was sent to the AHL to go play for the Tucson Roadrunners. And then halfway through the season, there was a suspension. This kind of crazy moment where a player on the Arizona Coyotes, injured and boarded, he took a dirty shot at a player, and this meant that they needed another winger. So they brought up Dylan Guenther. And Bill Armstrong, the general manager, the head coach, Andre Tourigny, they swore up and down that Dylan Guenther was not going to stick. Okay, he's only going to play during the 3-game suspension of the player in front of him. And he got up and he scored 3 games in his 3 games. And they looked at that scenario and they thought, let's go. And he played the second half of the season last year. And in those 41 games that he played, he scored more goals than Connor McDavid. Wow. And so he produced a lot of goals. And so this off season, they have 1 year left on his entry-level contract. And instead of letting that linger, they decided to reward him and give him an 8-year deal. And maybe a little bit early, but this also says to me that Bill Armstrong looked at the scenario and was like, this is a good kid. He didn't want to go back to juniors when we sent him, and all he did was go back to juniors and probably be the best player in the junior league that year. Then he didn't want to go back to the HL, and we sent him back, and he was on track to be one of the best players in the AHL statistically until he got called up to the NHL. And he was one of the best players in the NHL for the 41 games that he was with the Arizona Coyotes last year. So He is a prodigy. His shot is awesome. He has the ability to score from distance with a wrister. That's usually you need to be a little closer. He can be outside the circles and shoot and beat the goalie. And he gives a giant dynamic in scoring. And then the last part, just because I like to taunt other teams, but the Vancouver Canucks panicked and traded for some cap space and traded away a pick, and that pick became Dylan Guenther. And for Vancouver Canucks fans, I would love for it to be the case that Dylan Guenther makes them remember what many of them consider to be the worst trade in their franchise's history. And I'd love for Dylan Guenther to just make that worse for that fan base. I think that would be lots of fun.
That would be spectacular. Get a superstar out of just some trade, taking advantage of another team.
Taking care of some cap space.
Taking a salary dump. Yeah, and then we get Dylan Guenther. Yeah, it's awesome.
Just kind of final question for me, Keith. You mentioned, things for fans to learn, obviously, but maybe something to pay attention to. And maybe you already answered this question when you talked about scoring, the ability for the team to score in 5-on-5. But what are things, storylines we should be paying attention to kind of the rest of the preseason as we watch this team go through it and prepare for the regular season?
Yep. So there's going to be two guys that are going to make the team. They're centers. One is named Barrett Hayden, and he has usually played on the top line with Clayton Keller and Nick Schmaltz. And last night I saw, as the game went on, that they stopped giving more time to Barrett Hayden with their top two wingers, but instead started putting a guy that they signed in free agency, a guy named Kevin Stenlund. And so what you're going to see is, what I'd pay attention to is Kevin Stenlund playing with the top wingers more than Barrett Hayden. And it all comes down, in my opinion, to one skill, and that's winning a faceoff. And this team, through the first two preseason games, has two players on the team that seem to have the ability to win a faceoff, and like nobody else can. And possession is pretty important in all sports. And so winning the faceoff is super critical to getting possession of the puck and getting things going. And I think that if the battle for the most time on the ice is going to come down to which player can win us the faceoff. And last night was a perfect example of that. They actually, when it became 3-on-3 and overtime, they threw out Kevin Stenlund. He won the faceoff and then immediately skated off the ice, and they brought Clayton Keller on, and then Keller got the puck and went and scored. And so they just desperately needed to win the puck and get possession, and they sent Kevin Stenlund out. And so it's one of those, if we see that battle, it'd be a surprise. It'd be a surprise for Barrett Hayton to lose that spot, but I think it's certainly possible.
Keith, it's always a pleasure. You're such a pro, and we appreciate the insights and great work you're doing on Hive State Hockey on YouTube. Great resource for people to become familiar with this team and become familiar with the sport, really, with this new NHL team, new NHL franchise in the state. And from the reports from the players and others in the organization, they just all seem ecstatic to be here, to have a quality locker room, have a much bigger arena than they were used to. And so far seems to be a lot of excitement about this team from inside the organization and from the outside too.
It would be like checking into a hotel and then they say, we've upgraded you to the presidential suite. That moment, that way you feel when that happens, if that's ever happened or if it were to happen to you, that is what these players have experienced, going from Alex Morello being their owner to Ryan Smith being their owner. So yes, they are extremely excited and juiced about the opportunity to be here. So, and I think the fans are going to give it straight back to them. So it should be so much fun.
Yeah, and we're obviously thrilled to finally have hockey here. It's officially here.
Right. So. No more just frozen fury or just a one-off. It's a full season. And we're going to have the games here on The Fan. Actually, we're going to be an affiliate of their radio network. And so those games will be here on 106.9 FM, 1390 AM, The Fan. And through the course of the season, we plan to continue to check in with Keith Shirts and more videos we're anticipating on Hive State Hockey on YouTube.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, no problem.